Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. So thank you very much, Michael. So it's my pleasure to announce and to show you the new Geoportal, no? So I would like to start with a question, who actually think that it was needed? It was needed to have a Geoportal. Despite the fact that we had a Geoportal, no? We had something that we call Inspire Geoportal Pilot that was developed in 2011, and it was, of course, focused on the back-end processes, etc. So harvesting process. So, so you think it was needed? Okay. So let me show you what we've done. Well, I will start with 2 slides about a little bit of history. Then I will show you the demo, and then I would like to share with you some plans, because we do have some plans with the Geoportal. And what is important to say from the beginning is that, you know, this is really a joint venture, okay? So, and I think it nicely fit with the logo, with the motto of the conference. Only together we can make it happen, okay? So I will share with you some of the thoughts that we have for the future development. So, okay, let's start. Okay, I mentioned the Geoportal pilot. I'm not going to repeat it. So what is important, it was really data production driven, back-end. You know, to demonstrate, we develop also the metadata editor, the validator, so all the tools to help data providers really to fill the obligation that is in the Inspire. However, after some of the criticism from you, not many, we had a thought that probably the whole concept of this multi-thematic Geoportal was wrong. Because very often these portals are not really able to satisfy the user needs. And the Geoportal pilot was not an exception, or is not an exception. So therefore, roughly 14 months ago, we started together with DG Environment to really think about, how we can improve it, what we can really make out of it. We have hundreds of metadata records. Nobody can find anything. Nobody can download anything because it's so complex. It's mixing metadata of data sets, services, etc., etc. So for users who are not experts, actually Inspire was a disaster, we have to admit. So we came with the idea that let's start to really concentrate on something that is useful and that is really can be really used by users. And the idea of profiling of the content by several teams or by the completeness of the data, was the direction. So that was the initial of the thought of the concept of thematic views that we introduced roughly 1 year ago, and we shared it with you through the beta version that was not officially launched, but we were surprised how spread it, how it was communicated, even without us putting some effort. The main idea was really to simplify the access to and the use of those data that were kind of pre-cooked for the users. Okay. At the same time, DG Environment was pushing for a clear direction to demonstrate the use of Inspire for environmental reporting. So we used that activity as a nice testing driver or testing activity for this new tool. So we thought that the tool is also to monitor the provision of this data. Okay. So the concept was received very positively from you. We were very pleased. However, we had some issues. We had the issues of the performance. We also had some issues with the statistics that immediately once we published the viewer, you were complaining that no, we have more data sets. No, it's not possible. We have thousands of services up and running. How come that you don't see them? And the truth was usually somewhere in between, okay? So we really dedicated a lot of time recently on improving the performance, making sure that the statistics are right. We optimized the back-end processes, And also how we improve it, we also improve the performance rate, so the responses, because we completely recorded the front-end applications, okay? At the same time, we started to integrate the Geoportal with the other Inspire tools, like the website, registry, and validator. Okay, so, and here we are. So let me show you what we did. Michael, I can't see the...
Yeah, you made some new snippets. I don't know if we can move it. Oops. Okay. There we go.
Okay, great. So this is it. This is the front end of the new Geoportal. As you can see, it consists of 3 major parts. So 2 viewers, the Inspire viewer that facilitates the access and use of all Inspire data that we are harvesting. Then one subset of this is the priority datasets viewer. This is the subset of datasets that are related to the environmental reporting. And then we integrated the Inspire reference validator, the entry point here. I'm not going to talk about the validator. That's the talk of Michael next presentation. So let me go back. So before showing one of the viewers, I would like to draw attention to the harvesting statute. We are in the distributed system. We are harvesting 36 endpoints. There is a registry of the endpoints, and there is also information about the frequency of the harvests, okay? So before you make any conclusions about availability or about anything related to data, please check the harvesting status. So if you click on it, you get an online up-to-date information about the harvesting of each of these 36 endpoints, okay? So as you can see, for the duration of the Inspire conference, we frozen the process just to make sure that, you know, we are not putting in question the functionality and performance of the portal. Okay, so this is the harvesting status. Important. So let me now go to the Inspire thematic viewer. So this is the current entry to the whole Inspire data that we are harvesting. We have 2 applications there. We have the country overviews. So this I will start with, so you'll see immediately what we have collected from you. So over 115,000 data sets metadata. Only 8,800 plus downloadable data sets. So as you can see, there is a gap. If you want to see how many viewable data sets we have over 20,000. You immediately see also the distribution, so you see the nice, you know, the map of Europe or wider Europe to see which countries are doing how. And below you see the statistics, the overall statistics. So, you know, we click on Austria, one of the front runners or champions, and you can see the list of all the data sets provided within the Inspire scope. Okay, the records are sorted by the availability of all the how to say. So if the data set is downloadable and viewable, as well as it has metadata, this is the highest priority. If it's only downloadable, it's the second. If it's only viewable, it's third. And if it's only metadata, it's the fourth in the priority list, okay, for the sorting. So let's have a look on one data set, okay, because that was the main issue for users, you know, how to get. So first of all, you see the metadata of the data set. You see the title, you see abstract, and very importantly, you immediately see the conditions to access and the limitation on use. Unfortunately, it is in the original language. We are working on the translation of those to English at first. That's something that is one of the tasks to be done in the future, near future, hopefully. Okay, so if you want to download all the metadata about the data sets, you have a download button here, and you download all the XML file with all the metadata, okay? Okay, so this is the metadata. Well, I want to see it. So, by accident, I click on geological map. Being a geologist, so And so according to the title, this is a geological map of Austria at a scale 1 to 500,000. You immediately see the layer title, you see the name, you see in which coordinate reference system it is provided. If you install Google Earth, you can also see it in that software environment. You can access the service metadata, I will show you later. But what is important, you want to see it. Okay. Here we are. So it's a very simplistic leaflet library that shows the data on the OpenStreetMap, okay? So this is the geological map of Austria, okay? Maybe I'm satisfied, so I want to download it. So you go to download option. Here you see immediately that it's in the shapefile. It's a zip shapefile, so it's an atom feed bulk download option here. It is in this CRS, and you click on Get Dataset, and you start downloading it. Just to click, so you can see that it's really the case. Okay, and that's it. You put it in your whatever GIS software you're using. What is important here is this little exclamation mark, which says, hopefully, it doesn't, sorry. No, it says that this is a third-party service that you cannot blame Commission for not functioning all this. And this is important. So if you have any issue with that service, please contact the responsible organization that should be provided inside the metadata. So let's have a look whether we see who is the responsible party. Okay, so you click on the service metadata, and you see it's the Geological Survey of Austria, and here is the contact email. So if you have any complaints, please, this is the direction. Not JRC, not DG Environment. This is the organization. Okay, sorry, I'm just. I like this one. Okay, so this is basically it. All the other applications. Let me show quickly the priority data sets. Okay, there we have 3 applications. Country overview, so the overview of the provision of the priority data sets by countries. We have the same by the 6 environmental domains and environmental legislation. I will show you the environmental legislation. You can see the response is quite nice. And for each of those categories of filtering, you immediately see the statistics. So for instance, we have for the Water Framework Directive, there are 214 data sets tagged that are related. And we have 86 of those that are immediately downloadable. And I don't know, 125 that is viewable, okay? So if you click on it, you see the distribution, again, using the same map and the same statistics. So you select the country, and again, the story is the same. The last thing that I want to show you is that once you are in this final result page, okay, you can also now switch to, to another country, another legislation. So for instance, I'm now interested not in the Framework Directive, Water Framework Directive, but another one, okay, and you get it for the same country. Also, you can change the country here, okay? Let's see if Belgium has this. See? So this is basically it. The last thing that I wanted to show you is here we have find out more. So here it's a contextual information about the priority data set activity under the MIWP, so the Maintenance and Implementation Working Program. We have here the links to the Inspire knowledge base. And here we have also, we allow still the links to the resource browser, which is an expert platform for really searching through the whole content of Inspire. You have a lot of parameters there that you can use, but it's for experts, so therefore we put it a little bit aside, and we are planning to completely redo it. Okay, so that's it. Did you like it? Again, I would like to stress that whatever shop we are building, if the shop is empty, as it was said during the plenary, That's it, you know. Nobody would go there if it's empty. So it's a joint venture, please. So let me continue with 3 slides about the future plans. Okay, and I would like to stress that these are possible directions. So, you know, we are of course welcoming your feedback, any suggestions, you know, etc., etc. So first of all, we would like to reinforce the backend. So we are in the process of adding another server that would allow us to decouple the harvesting process from the other components of the Geoportal. That would mean for you that we would be able to introduce the self-uploading mechanism. So at any moment when you will feel that you have updated your national catalogs, you will be able to press the button and the upload will start. So, you know, we have been criticized that, you know, oh, we've been working, but you haven't harvested, so we don't see the results, it's difficult, etc. So this is our response. So we hope that we will introduce this functionality by the end of the year. Also, at the same time, we would like to introduce a kind of a quality check, quality check, that as soon as we get your data, we will run quickly the kind of a check of your discovery service, and then we provide you with the results, quick results. And we will be waiting for your confirmation that the numbers, etc., are, you know, according to what you think you have in your national catalog. So we will be waiting till you confirm that, yes, it's correct, and then we will continue processing your data. Okay, this is a necessary step just to be transparent between us, because we, you know, again, it's about this, you know, oh, we have more numbers, we have more services, no, you don't have, etc. So we think that this could help. Then we are thinking about how to monitor the services, the availability of the services, because one thing is that it is available at the point of the harvest, the other thing is that 2 days later, when the user wants the data, it's down. So, you know, it's tricky, we know, there are softwares, we know, but there is also kind of a political dimension of this issue. So we are thinking how, you know, this is something that we are thinking about. Unfortunately, the last one, I have to say that we cannot continue supporting you as we've done last 3-4 months because of the resource issue. So I will tell you what we are proposing instead. But, you know, really, some of your questions on the Geoportal help desk is really, it's a basic level, you know, what is WMS, you know, so, and we really cannot do this kind of support. But I will tell you later what we are proposing. So another functionality regarding the new Inspire monitoring and reporting, as you know, we are planning to completely use the metadata of the data sets to be the source of the monitoring information. So we are planning to have a dedicated viewer that would display data according to agreed set of key indicators. Then, I already mentioned the resource browser. We want to completely redo that. We would like to have it as an open API, and we would facilitate the service providers and developer to use this platform really to develop innovative services. So this is something that we are planning to do. We would like to call it Inspire Analytics, buzzword we like. So this is it. So Map Viewer, another question, you know, as you saw, we implemented a simple leaflet solution, but of course we can imagine a big web GIS functionality. We are not really convinced that way, but you know, this is something that we would like to discuss. And we, of course, are seeking the synergies and integration with other Commission activities, and for instance, the European Open Data Portal. Also, the ReportNet 3.0 project just started, so we are there, and we are discussing how the National Inspire services and the Geoportal can be utilized there, not to start from the scratch. And this is my last slide here, I guess. Two more. So the data viewers, I already said we are seeking your feedback. So any new viewers we can do depending on your request. So okay, so we are really seeking your feedback on what we can improve, how we can sort the Inspire data in a different way. So this is an opportunity for you. So we can imagine, for instance, a full compliant data set kind of a viewer. It could be a European-wide cross-border data sets, etc., etc. The translation I mentioned, Then we would like to include in the metadata section the list of the objects of your datasets. So basically, this is a second step. Now we're talking about SIS datasets mainly. So in the next step, we will start looking into the datasets, and we would like to show start with showing the spatial object types that are present in the datasets. Okay? And based on that, we can also imagine another viewer that really would be the object-driven viewer. Okay? And this is actually really the idea of the whole Inspire from the beginning. It's really the object-driven distributed system. So just imagine the European monitoring station for groundwater. This is exactly these examples of. So these are our plans. And regarding the governance and organization, so we are setting up an advisory board with other commission services, EEA, and also some member states representatives, really to help us to drive to decide which directions to go. And also, as I mentioned, the Geoportal help desk kind of a limited support. We would like to introduce a new thing. We would like to really work hard for certain time, let's say 1 year or 1.5 years, with those that are really responsible for national catalogs. And we would like to have twice a year a meeting with those people for 2 days, really to discuss the issues of their national data sets not being displayed in the European Geoportal. Okay? So this is our offer to you, and I think that's it. And I would like to thank, first of all, to the Geoportal team, to my colleagues. They really work very hard. And of course, I would like to thank you because, this is a joint venture.
Thanks, Robert. I think we don't have time. So over to myself. I'm going to tell you a bit about what other tools we have been working on, even though I must say that a lot of effort actually really has gone from the whole team at JRC into the new portal. So I'm mainly going to talk about the validator, the reference validator that we have been developing for 2-3 years now, and the Inspire registry as well. So just to quickly remind you why we need this reference validator, you've seen it's now actually connected directly on the Geoportal site, landing page. We wanted to give it as an offer to implementers to check their implementation progress, so as a help for all of you, the organizations implementing Inspire. As a help for organizations in the member states and at the European level to monitor what's happening in terms of progress in the implementation. So how are we doing with conformance against the implementing rules and the technical guidelines? And then also for solution providers to check their implementations against the Inspire requirements. And we have basically developed over the past few years executable and abstract test suites that are maintained under the governance of the maintenance and implementation group. So there's a specific subgroup on validation and conformity testing that is basically the group overseeing and maintaining and these artifacts that are used for the official validation results. And I just put here the reference to the GitHub space where these are maintained and the wiki of the subgroup where you can see the minutes of the meeting and the discussions ongoing as well. So what's in scope? We want to have the reference validator for all the tests, for all the technical guidelines that we've developed under Inspire. We've already done the tests for the Annex 1 specifications, the old version of the metadata technical guidelines, and download services for Atom and WFS. We're about to release the new version of the metadata technical guidelines and the for view services. And we have just started work on the SOS download services, and the other technical guidelines will come in the course of this and next year. The aim of the overall development was to have a reusable open source tool that can be also deployed inside an organization. So if you don't want to ship your data over the internet, you have large data sets, you can also deploy it within your own organization, or you have access constraints to your data, you can deploy it inside your own organizations. We've built it on existing solutions, and I will come to that later on. And it's basically configurable and extensible, so you can add your own test rules as well if you want. And I should mention our sponsors as well. And this has been developed under the ISA and ISA Squared programs, and is currently developed under the ELISE ISA Squared action. Now, there has been some confusion over the years about the two validators that we had. So you may have seen, if you followed the Geoportal closely over the years, that there was something that was called the Validator 2, which is basically, as you see on the right, is basically the tool that was developed as part of the Geoportal to basically do all the checkings and enriching the information that we're harvesting from the catalogs in order to display it in a useful fashion in the Geoportal. And at one point we made that available as a standalone tool because we wanted to give data providers the possibility to emulate what the Geoportal will do when it harvests your data. So that was the main reason that you can basically see what will happen with your data when it's being analyzed by the Geoportal. Now, this was done outside, let's say, before the MIG basically came across and we had this group on validation. So basically at one point we said, okay, we need to put this kind of validation logic on formal grounds. And that's when we started the work under the maintenance and implementation work program to basically come to commonly agreed validation rules. And that's where we basically developed the Inspire reference validator. So that, on the left-hand side, this is really the tool that you should use if you want, let's say, reliable and authoritative compliance tests. We are aware that in some cases there may be discrepancies between the two tools for certain tests. If you come across such discrepancy, please tell us. Because we're trying to make them, of course, consistent with each other, but in some cases there are still discrepancies, and we will come to that actually during the work of the validation group. We discover a lot of issues with the current requirements and that are not always entirely clear and that we need to disentangle. So that's what I said. What's new in the reference validator? So we are about to release the new ETSs for metadata and for the view services, and I already said we started on the SOS as well. Now, one thing that has been really interesting in the work of the subgroup is that basically it has led us to understand a lot of issues that we have with some of the requirements in the technical guidelines. So we often came across issues where we said, hey, people complained about the results of a test, and when we looked at it more closely, we said, actually, maybe the test is correct, but if we look at the requirement is ambiguous. It's not really clear what is really meant, could be interpreted in different ways. Maybe it shouldn't actually be a requirement, should be a recommendation. So we have a lot of these really intense, in-depth discussions where we look at the technical guidelines. And it has basically led us ultimately to have some discussions in the MIG-T now as well, to see, for example, how can we simplify the requirements that are related to linking data with services. So it's not only related to one technical guidelines, but it's how they all play together. And these are the things that we only really come to understand now that we are actually trying to use the data in the Geoportal, but that we're also trying to build this reference validator and discuss, let's say, all the issues not independent from each other, but together in one group. There's also some improvements on the software, bug fixing, some improvements of performance, and we're also discussing on how we can move it into the cloud to make it even more scalable and performant. What's interesting in terms of the tool is basically that we have started discussing, or we set up a new organization to further develop the ETF tool that is the basis for the reference validator. That is currently jointly led by a steering group made up of interactive instruments who have been developing the first versions of the software, and the JRC who has funded the further work and is currently funding also further developments. So we've set up this organization in order to jointly discuss on where we want to go with the tool, in order to avoid that one implementer goes in one direction and the other one in another direction. And it's been an interesting exercise we've been learning while we were doing, but I think it could be a blueprint for other tools that have been developed by the Commission and that could be released into or handed over into a kind of a real open source project in the future. Okay, that's it on the validator. On the registry, again, why do we need it? It's clear that we need to manage a lot of items and unique identifiers for them in Inspire. So the code list is the most obvious example, but also the Inspire themes and other things. So we can make unique references to them. We don't have to always type in the name of a code or the title of a legislation. And we all know when we type things in, we make errors. So we want to use unique identifiers for these kind of things. We have a governance structure again, like for the validation, which is the submitting organizations. There's one nominated for each member state, plus the EEA, DGN, and JRC. And there's what we call a control body, that is basically a group that decides about proposals for changes to the registers. And we have a public page where you can see all the ongoing change requests and how they have been addressed. Now, what we've been mainly working on in the last year is to improve the tool that we use for running the Inspire registry, which is the registry software with a little 3 inside. It comes from the ARENA ISA action that first developed it. This is the old version. You can see all of those of you who have already used the registry, this is basically the main features that we have. It's multilingual, you can search, you can basically browse through the item and see what's the status. And we have a number of different formats that you can download. So that was all going quite well, but we had a lot of feedback from people using this and deploying this in their own organizations to say that mainly it's very difficult to install, it's difficult to update the data inside the registers. So we've been trying to work on a new version, and just to introduce you quickly the main features of that new version. So we wanted to make it backwards compatible. So in order to, for people that have installed the old version, there's a migration tool that basically brings it to the new format that we're using in the underlying database. We have implemented a simple editing interface where, as a submitting organization, you can basically log in and directly edit the text in an editor, and you will see side by side the changes that you have basically introduced. And once you've done your edits, you can basically submit your change proposal directly to the control body for a decision. So this is basically where you can manage your change proposals. Usually you have a dashboard where you can basically send off your change proposals. As a control body, this is the view that you're seeing now, you can then basically see what has come in terms of proposals. You can accept it, you can ask for changes, you can provide comments, or you can reject a proposal. We also have created some possibility for a manager of a register to kind of simply visually create a new register and to define the structure with the kind of elements and attributes that you would like to have in your descriptions of your new register. Other main features, as I said, we've simplified the installation. We've also made it more reliable backend based on Apache Solar, similar to what we're doing in the Geoportal as well, and reduced the number of file exports that have been needed earlier, and we're working on a RESTful API as well. We're in the middle, or we quite progressed on developing the version 2 completely. We've basically finalizing the editing interface right now and the migration as well, and we'll work until the end of the year on the other 2 remaining bits and pieces. So we hope to be able to release it in January next year. And this brings me to my last slide. We had a nice workshop 2 weeks ago in Ispra with register experts to discuss basically this new version, but to also collect and prioritize requirements for the software, and to basically discuss possible scenarios for future governance of the tool. And basically, I think I wanted to share this with you because I think it could be, again, a blueprint for collecting requirements and prioritizing requirements for the other tools that we're developing, including the validator and the Geoportal. So it worked quite well with a hands-on session where people actually afterwards kind of prepared change proposals, and we kind of prioritized them in the group, and that is was a nice experience that I think can be repeated for other tools as well. So this was a very quick run through the other tools that we're doing. Again, if there's one very quick question, I can take it. Otherwise, we'll postpone that to the coffee break as well. Okay, you're still digesting lunch and the presentations. So, okay, so thanks very much. And I will then hand over to Alex straight away.
Allow me to start with a little bit of context. As we saw from the presentation of Robert, there is, I think you would all agree, very good progress with regards to the discoverability of data. We're going to see for sure in the months to come increase of the download services. What I'm going to talk about happens after we are actually capable of downloading the data. We have still some issues with the consumption of data. The majority of you who have tried it would agree that the consumption in many cases of Inspire compliant data is not easy, and the reasons for this is because on a technical guidance level, we have defined, the Inspire community has defined complex data structures. Existing applications in many cases, being it libraries, web, desktop or mobile, cannot immediately with their out-of-the-box functionality consume the content. And on the other hand, there we see a lot of rapid technological developments in mainstream IT. And the community demand is, of course, for simpler solutions that can immediately be used out of the box, which would make a lot of sense after we have unlocked the data to be able to easily consume it. And within the MIG, there are two actions that are approaching these challenges from two different angles. 2007.2 is dealing with alternative encodings for Inspire data, and the other action is working on the better client support for Inspire data. By an alternative, we mean alternative to GML data encodings. So the tasks of this action is first of all to come up with an encoding rule for GeoJSON as an encoding. Why GeoJSON? Some months ago, there was a questionnaire launched about which are the encodings that the Inspire community wants to see. No surprises here. I think GeoJSON was the choice of most of you. So it is the early bird. And once the GeoJSON encoding rule is done, there is, of course, the door is open for other alternative encodings. The other task of this action is to come up with generic rules and approaches for flattening of data models. You know, there are those complex structures in the data models, and there is a lot of you have indicated the need to actually flatten the structure. This second task should be done independent from the actual encoding. So the idea here is to come up with the right approach that can be applied then for the different types of encodings. Third task, from a procedural point of view, to propose a means for the proposition and the endorsement of such additional encodings. And you see something else on the slide, good practice. This action is tasked to come up with good practice documents. Going to elaborate a little bit later on what do we mean by good practice. There is a subgroup also, it is important to mention, within the scope that is working within the scope of 2017.2. There was a call for nominations, and we have 11 member state representatives, something that might seem as a minor issue, but I think it is really important is to highlight that the work is being done on GitHub. Why is it important? Because it's the de facto standard for software development, sharing of code, sharing of issues. And the group is quite active, I can admit. During the summer months, there are more than 20 different issues collected about GeoJSON, what might be encountered, some examples. And there's an example here on the slide about observations and measurements, simple feature. With the example, we can immediately extract it from GitHub, play with it, see how it behaves with the client application, and we have actually done this, so we immediately get the results, and it's really, really interactive and flexible. A few words about the good practices, some context. We have really well-established formal process for updating, implementing rules and technical guidance documents. With regards to technical guidance, in particular, it is quite a time-consuming. We come up with bottom-up through a community approach. We come up with solid guidance documents for implementers, but it might take quite some time. So at the same time, there are multiple channels, thematic clusters, platform, many other channels, and there are ongoing discussions. There are examples, and there is very good work being done on member state, cross-border project, and so on levels. So the idea of this good practice is to actually reside somewhere in between the free discussion through the different channels and the really formal technical guidance document. So from a procedural point of view, there are 5 steps to be followed for a particular activity to be recognized as an Inspire good practice. First of all, initiation request. So there is a good practice fiche. So it's an artifact that needs to be populated, and the artifact itself contains sections about evidence that the solution, what has actually been put in practice, and some evidence on how it has received broad support. Second step, do an outreach through a webinar. Popularize what has been done in front of the Inspire community. Step number 3, submission for inclusion in a good practice section in the Inspire knowledge base. Ideally with the support of some of the Inspire, so with the support of member state representatives, national contact points, and so on. Step number 4, the opinion of the MIG to endorse, or in case there is something unclear, to ask for clarification, or might be that the good practice is also rejected. Step number 5, feedback from users through a good practice repository. This is part of the knowledge base. And then, of course, once the good practice is endorsed, next step naturally would be, if there is enough interest, if there is uptake by the community, to go for a technical guidance document. There's one early bird, the GeoDDCat is already application profile. It's endorsed as a good practice. You can see it on the Inspire, within the Inspire knowledge base. There's background material there and technical documentation, as well as the recording of the webinar, which took place some months ago. The next MIG action, the one about the better client support to Inspire data, the tasks here are, first of all, to collect issues with the consumption of data. But it's really what we're trying to do here is collect evidence together with data. So if we don't really want to leave the discussion on the abstract level. So we're collecting actual data, collecting endpoints of Inspire services, and we will commission we will conduct a study on the usability, going into the details of the data, but also relating the data sets to the solutions, to the most oftenly used solutions for the consumption of data. And then we would like to talk to software vendors. So it's once we have the evidence from the community, then the next step would be really to engage the software vendors. And we launched in the beginning of the year a questionnaire, and then we've collected quite a lot of evidence there. Again, having the opportunity here, we have GML files uploaded, we have a lot of endpoints, and these results we will integrate with other information from the thematic clusters, from national initiatives. All of this content would be analyzed together, and then next step for us would be a workshop. What we would like to achieve in the end is a resolution. So we want to see what the actual issues are, document those, and then prioritize those, and discuss roadmap of regarding what can be done together with the software vendors. Last slide, something which is again very interesting from the point of view of the consumption of Inspire data, together with the OSGeo Foundation. So this is this umbrella organization where most of the open source geospatial projects are part. We collaborated. We're trying to engage with the open source community, and we within the version of their OSGeo Live virtual environment. So this is it's a virtual machine with a lot of open source geospatial software pre-cooked, already configured, ready to use with some sample data. We worked together with OSGeo. The latest version that was just released about 1 month ago includes a little section on Inspire. And we see this as a really, for those of you who want to go the open source way, as a very good starting point, where the whole process from storage of the data, how it is being served, how the different solutions configured. So all of this out of the box, so it's an educational value, and then really to see how things work in practice. It's the URL that you have on the slide. You can really download it, deploy it, and then play with the different tools. This having been said, thanks a lot for the attention.
Thanks a lot, Alex.
Thank you. My name is Javier Lopez from the University of Zaragoza, Spain. My question is about alternative encodings. Okay. This summer, I has been commissioned by the National Geographic Institute of Spain to work as alternative encoding with the OGC GeoPackage format. I has been successful in to transform 2 complete data models with the rules of encoding and the full toolkit for migrating the data from a PostGIS database into this encoding, and I tested in the Quantum GS3. It worked perfectly. So what's next?
Thanks for the good question. I think we have a candidate for a good practice here. This is exactly in the spirit of, so you have the solution, it's already implemented, you have the evidence how it can be done. I think I would encourage you really to investigate, or we can sit together after to show you this artifact, go for it, and then we organize and then there is the process that was mentioned. But GeoPackage, yes, would be very, very interesting for sure.
Yeah. I want to re-emphasize what Alex just said. The good practice procedure, let's say, is really something that we would like to encourage you all to look into, because I think it was basically born by the fact that we basically said once a year we come to the Inspire conference and we hear all these interesting stuff that is going on in the member states, and then for 1 year we hear nothing, and then next year we hear again interesting stuff, but it never, or rarely, it comes basically up to our attention or to the attention of the MIWP. So the idea is really basically to give the communities a tool to say, look, we have something that really works, that we've shown that it does, we have implemented, we're using it, we can show it, it's actually accepted by the users, it's useful. Let's propose it to others that might find it useful as well. So it's really a community thing that you can use. And for the GeoPackage, it was one of the things, formats that was being proposed, or encodings that was proposed, but in the end not, let's say, voted as the main one. The idea of the subgroup is really to show how to develop an alternative encoding for one, GeoJSON, which was the chosen one, and then to show to people, okay, if you want to copy the same procedure, you can do it for whatever else you think is useful, and you can show that it's implemented.
Okay, good afternoon. So, so as you all know, the volume of data is continuously growing, and the spatial data is not an exception. But paradoxically, not all the data is ready and easy to be used. And we have different causes for that. There is the technological interoperability barriers, such as formats, access control mechanism, different sizes. There is also big data, but we also have a big variety of terms of use. And we are creating, without probably even wanting it, data silos. And that also happens even in the open data world. So with this context, we carried out a work within ELISE that was a continuation, as Robin said, of the access control work to analyze what was going on specifically in the INSPIRE context. And also to highlight which were the main user barriers that we could find. It's also worth saying that the outputs of these reports have been shared with DG Connect for the review of the PSI directive. And in the link that I offer under the picture, you can have the full report with the proposals for the good practices. So what is INSPIRE saying about data sharing principles? So basically, INSPIRE is not really entering into which licensing and pricing conditions it must be, you must use. This is left to each organization. But what it says is that in order to share it in harmonized conditions, two metadata elements of the metadata records should be at least completed. Those are the conditions for access and use and the limitations on public access. And those are the metadata fields, I mean the source information that we have used for our report. So the report was done as desk experiment where we put ourselves in the skin of a user. And we were aiming at reusing the data source even for commercial purposes. And so we were faced with, against this metadata record, and we needed to figure out if we were able to use it or not. So behind the scenes, what we were doing was a structured analysis. We were first looking at the metadata level to understand if the information was there, if it was complete, in which language was it expressed. But we were also looking at the terms of use level that often matched with the metadata record itself. But very often also we need to move externally because they were developed into a licensing document. And in that case, we were looking as well at which language they were using, if there was a version, what was the name of the license, if there was any, format, fees, and also, of course, the rights that were granted or were not granted. That was done for around 30,000 metadata records that were available back in January 2016 in the INSPIRE Geoportal. You may be thinking that this information already is quite outdated, but the reality is that looking to what the initial conclusions of the DGF study that Robin mentioned previously on the Article 17, the conclusions are quite similar. And this exercise can be also used as a baseline for comparison. So in this chart, what I wanted to express was the user journey. In reality, we had a resource that was targeted, and we had to go towards different stages. You can see, again, there is the availability of the terms of use that was checked first, then the language, then the format. For format, I mean, for example, if there were some persistent identifier in place, if it was a website or etc. We also looked into the content and into the provisions. For example, a kind of content parameter that we looked at was if there was a summary version that was making a user-friendly version of the legal code. And every time you see a red box, there is an obstacle in the journey. Sometimes it means that the journey cannot finish and the user doesn't know what to do next. And the most obvious user barriers is that if there is no information at all on the terms of use, it will never figure out what he can do with the data set. And that way, we came up with around 33 different user barriers. You have them all in the report, also with some proposals to overcome it. And if we go more in detail into the findings, you can see that regarding availability, we had a bit more than 800 different terms of use, unique terms of use. At the metadata record level, we had quite a good result with 95% of them available. But when we went to a network service level, that is, when through the network service we took the endpoint and we asked the get capabilities operation, for example, we found out that more or less half of them didn't have any information at all. So again, on these 800 different terms of use, only 13% of them were referring to a specific data license, license document. And among these license documents, if we can categorize it by schemes, we can see that the most common ones were the organizational license with 63% of them, followed by standard public licenses, that is Creative Commons, Open Data License, etc., and then by standard government license. I point out also this small piece of Inspire license subtype, which in the end is only a subtype of organizational license. I just wanted to highlight it here because some organizations found it useful to make a license on purpose only for the Inspire directive. So if we look at the licenses still, but at other parameters, we have, for example, the language. 30% of them had a multilingual version, including the English language, and a bit less than 40% had a summary version, a user-friendly version of it. I need to say at this point that both the language and the summary version usually overlap with the use of standard public licenses. So going to the conditions that were required, this is not anymore on the small portion of the 13% of metadata records that were used in licenses, but on the overall 30,000 records. 15% of them were saying explicitly that there was a requirement of attributing. Normally, it comes together with the formula to attribute it, and in itself, that's not an obstacle. It may be an obstacle when it is combined with other requirements, such as including the copyright notice, etc., especially when combining with other data sources. Regarding the prohibitions, the commercial use is the one that appeared the most. In around 40% of the cases, it was not allowed to make a commercial use of the data sets, but there was a 5% of them that were explicitly saying that it was allowed. Then we have left around 57% of the cases where it was not mentioned at all. And that's also a case of user barrier in a way, because if it is not explicitly say what you can do or what you cannot do, the common sense says that you shouldn't be using that, or at least you should double check that with the data provider. And finally, I also wanted to bring you this indicator that we created. We call it perceived degree of openness because, again, that's a subjective analysis that we did. And to do that, we used the information that was provided through the metadata records, and we matched it against the different articles of the definition of open license. And we found out that around 25% of the records could be considered either open or public domain, which is much more what it is said actually in the metadata records. We only found around 44 records that were actually saying that they were open data, at least looking at those metadata fields that were in study. And then we had around 55% of the records that had a hybrid character, that is, they were free in terms of money for personal use, but as soon as you needed to make a commercial use of it, the licensing were changing. So, as a future work, there are many approaches we could follow. We could harmonize the license maybe, but that's quite challenging because we are many organizations that each one maybe has different priorities. We could maybe harmonize the semantics of the terms of use. An approach for that would be maybe to create a license register, but again, that would be only a partial solution because many organizations aren't really using a proper license. Or we could maybe use a digital rights vocabularies, which are able to to shape quite well the different prohibitions and conditions to be included. I mean, whatever way we go forward, I mean, as a software user, maybe I could recommend to double check if it's not possible maybe to reuse any of the public standard licenses that are already out there, because they really bring a lot of advantages. They are modular. I mean, if you do not want to share them on an open data, let's say, approach, you can always restrict it. They are multilingual. They even have some PID mechanisms to understand which version you are really dealing with. They are even including the database right, and in reality, they are already quite known by the users. So that's it from my side.
Thanks a lot, Lorena, for bringing us closer to this tricky issue. I think sometimes we, as mainly techies, we don't really want to go into this legal muddy waters. But as we can see, I think it will be one of the next big stumbling blocks. Once we basically now make the data downloadable through the portal, we will then basically hit that next block. And that's probably going to be even more difficult than getting the new Geoportal out.
Hi. What I want to ask is, are the outcomes from your onderzoek study comparable to the outcomes of the Article 17 study?
Yes.
Okay. No, because I think they look at other things, and also I think part is solved by the new metadata profile. If you look at languages and code lists.
And I think we need to discuss this with Hugo as well. But from what I've seen, I mean, I think let's say the basic issues are the same ones that we're seeing also in the new study, even with the new guidelines and so on. I mean, yes, maybe it has improved a bit, but you still largely see a lot of the big stumbling blocks and barriers that we've identified. Yes. Okay.
Just one addition from Geoportal point of view. What we see is very often discrepancies between the conditions on use or limitation on access for data sets are different from those that are in the services part. And this is very confusing. So very often you have a zero, so no conditions, so everything is free. And then you go to the service metadata, and then you have some conditions. So this is a tricky thing for users. So it's a clear barrier.
Oh yeah, right. Okay. Sorry. It's okay. Okay, so yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Now for something slightly lighter, I hope. However, I'm going to, I thought that after the topics that we've just gone through, I need to do a little bit of this, So we all as a community, we are pretty knee-deep in this technical and organizational and other challenges all the time. And we discuss these and think about, is this really the right approach? Why do we do all that? Is it worth the effort? Yeah. That we are investing into it, and isn't it all in the end much too useful to really be much too complex? Sorry, much too useful. That's what I really think. It's just too good to be true. Isn't it just all to be complex to be really useful? And yeah, the interesting thing is, of course, that we don't just deal with the data day to day. That's more or less our job. But we also get to work with a lot of people who have expectations towards what we're doing. And that includes people outside this community. And with that, I'd like to quickly hand over to you for a moment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Torsten. So while being aware of the complexity, I guess it's been mentioned once or twice today in this session. So we actually wanted to see, is it possible to reduce the complexity, and how do you actually deal with that one? Like, what do you do with it? So we couldn't think of a better way to test the complexity than to test it on our kids. I mean, we kind of took care well of them while testing. Yeah, everything was completely compliant. But yeah, but that was like the way to see how complex is it really, and can we reduce it, and what to do with that. So basically, I'm sure that at some point in your lives you get those questions from your kids or nieces. What do you do at work? So what's your work? Why do you go every day there? And can I come with you? So while you can, if you work in Inspire and on data harmonization like we do, you can go in and say, well, you know, I take those shape files and then I make them to GML and then I publish WFS and WMS, and then you don't get a question if you can bring the kid to the work because he's away. Or you can try to kind of bring it more down, reduce the complexity, and do something like Torsten did with his son. So when he was asked what he's working on, Torsten said basically that he's helping the countries so they can share their data, which is the basic idea of Inspire. And yeah, of course, the question is, why would you do that? I mean,
to be honest, there were 17 whys or so.
In between, yeah, we reduced that one as well. So they want to work together and solve the big issues of today. So you can read the rest on the slide. And so that was the conclusion that came from Torsten's son. It is kind of like a puzzle, right? So we have to fit all those different bits and pieces together and make them work together. So that was kind of a way to explain it to a 5 or 9-year-old. So what do you do when you go to work? But we took it like a step further, and we really tested how does it, if you give a tool, technology, and a data set to a kid, and you let the kid do things with it, can he or she kind of cope with that? So this is what we're going to show you, or Torsten's going to show you. But basically, we collected a few questions from our own kids. You will see them in the video asking those questions. Then we walk them through the process of preparing the data together, and we let them actually use the tools to harmonize and transform and publish everything. So
to answer the question.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. Let me just try to start the video.
Yeah, no, sorry, that was one tick too far.
No.
It has a long lead time. But
Okay.
normally if you click in it.
No.
No?
Did you upload the video?
Yeah, it's
Yes,
embedded.
But did you upload it as a separate file?
No,
No.
it should be embedded. It's weird that it doesn't.
It is.
no.
Oh, there's the video.
Okay, good.
So, can you kind of
I'm not sure if we have the
add
audio.
volume to
Do you
it?
need the audio?
Yeah, okay, no audio. So luckily we added some subtitles. We kind of anticipated that.
They asked the questions, of course, in their own languages, coming from 3 different countries.
So with the recent storms and so on, flooding was a topic. Yeah.
So that will be the questions. Sorry, there was no tone to it, but Torsten, you can take over now and explain
Yeah.
how we got
So-
the answers.
Yeah, kind of what we were most interested in really is to see, okay, where do we really stumble and fall in explaining what we do, and where do they understand it? And you were probably able to read the questions, and you will have noticed all of the questions that children could think about were like one object questions. They are, where's the next tram station? What is the water quality in Lake X? What is, and they are very, very focused on their living situation. And it's, I don't know, we had quite a long list, and there was not a single exception. So there was no of these questions, okay, what's the, I don't know, overall state of soil humidity in Europe or something like that, yeah? At least, pardon? Strange, yeah, really. I tried my best. And yeah, naturally what we didn't do is we did not sit our children without guidance in front of the software and ask them now get friggin' harmonize it, yeah. But what we were interested in as a first step was to actually see if they could do some matching. So if the principal idea of relating concepts to each other, whether that would work or not. And surprisingly, well, we had to provide some translation in some cases, naturally. But other than that, it's pretty clear. So it's that part is something that everybody can do. So the actual terminology, of course, it's going to be inaccurate. That's no question. But people are really happy connecting things, yeah. And even if they are not the same thing, they will take them and mesh them somehow together. And people in this case specifically includes children. And then the result is you have somehow combined the data set that has in principle all the information that you need. And then is the question, can you actually answer your own question with that particular data set? Yeah? And there the main thing that I wanted to see was mostly, okay, does the data model get in the way or not? So one of the questions that we are often wondering about is in this case it's environmental monitoring facilities. It's not the easiest one, but you saw quite a few of the questions were like, what's the water quality and so on. So this is water quality stuff. And the nice thing was for me to see that it was no problem at all. Yeah. So if you have like a structured data set that basically explains through its labels and so on how somebody who can read can actually use that data reasonably well. Obviously, they did not try to look at it in an XML viewer. Yeah? They used some, mostly the component here to the right, which is kind of an attribute tree-based viewer. But given that all kids around 9 know how to click on a hyperlink on their tablet or whatever, this was no problem at all. So the data models really didn't get in the way. What was more difficult, for example, was the assessment of whether when there's 100 bacteria in the water being measured, whether that's good or bad, of course. But that's something that typically only experts will know. And that brings me towards the thing that usually we will need some interpretation on that data to make it really useful to answer these questions, which will come from experts. Like that's then maybe the flag on the beach, which is red, green, or whatever other colors. I think blue also exists. But in the end, the actual understanding of the structure, that went surprisingly well, in my view. One thing that I would like to mention is I didn't really pay enough attention to see if I could have tested the new Geoportal before with my kids, but I didn't. So we decided to not try discovery on them. That was part of the ethics committee's response. But things that did work quite well is so this targeted search to find a feature of interest. So that's no problem. So everybody's able to say, I like water quality, Lake Katzensee or Denmark or whatever. That's something that works quite well. What was also interesting to me to see is that while absolute map navigation is really problematic, like if you tell somebody with a static map, okay, where on this map is, for example, the place that you live in, at least for a 9-year-old, it's very difficult. But if you make it relative, starting from that feature, and they explore the context of the object, they will find, okay, this is where my swimming pool is, this is where my friend lives, and so on. So it's really, the natural mode is more or less an explorative mode, and that benefits greatly from having such tools which make that possible, which really enable you to click through things and discover basically relevant parts to your answer. That goes in the same direction of these. So the reason, if you want to make this, or the foundation for making this work, are basically linked data structures or object-oriented models where you have relevant information modeled together conceptually. So that I think is really the underlying thing that made a lot of this possible and feasible. Something that I would also like to point out is that it also heavily relied on interaction, and interaction is built on the actual data. If you once generate a static web map service, well, yeah, there's not that much you can do with that on top anymore. So it's really a hurdle for data accessibility and usefulness, even if you have lots of different maps, because you can't interact in the same way anymore. How we do the actual data access, that can be very different. So if I looked at, when I observed this, I really thought that, okay, this is more a behavioral thing. So it goes more towards APIs than actually downloading a data set and then trying to mangle that in some way, like we do in a typical GIS application. But it's really like, okay, I'm doing one call at a time. And okay, so I found the lake, but where can I find measurements? Okay, when I have the measurements, where can I find one that's from today? Where can I find one that indicates whether, it's poisonous to me or not, and so on. So it's really, there's lots of steps in this that I can answer incrementally, more or less. And I think that's really something that's important to keep in mind. We have, as a community, we have a lot of these kind of batch processing use cases where we really just want to get all the data and do something nice with it. But if we actually want to make it useful for this kind of questions that we've looked up here, it's really important that we think more on this behavioral approach. So what questions does somebody ask who's going step by step now? And in my view, the models that we currently have aren't actually that bad in that respect. And maybe just to end on one note in the end, so the Inspire styling itself was not at all helpful. So I had one small test with the Inspire styling and one that I made as an alternative to focus on that. And that's more or less also what I mentioned before. It's just that it's just not informative in a certain context. It was decided that we're going to present it in some way, and it's going to be informative to somebody who's made that styling in some cases, but outside that group, it's, there's not much classical thought went into that about producing a map that has a certain message, essentially. But I think our summary as a whole is that there are some parts which, make absolute sense, also from a perspective of these simple questions and easy use cases, so to speak. And I would just like to end on the note that I would encourage everybody to keep these simple step-by-step use cases in mind and continue supporting those. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, both of you, for the inspiring presentation. I think it's a good test. I mean, we all know if we try to explain to children, to our communications people, to other people what we're doing, it's not always easy. But it's a good test to ask yourself really why sometimes. So, any quick question before we close the session?
There were two validator URIs presented in your original presentation, and you told us use the one, don't use the other. You're officially saying the official one is the sandbox, the Geoportal one is wrong. That's what you said. That's why.
You didn't quite understand me. I'm saying if you want an authoritative result, use the one in the Inspire sandbox, the Inspire reference validator, because that is the one that is based on the commonly agreed rules in the MIG. The other one was developed independently, evolved earlier and in parallel, and it's not always 100% consistent with the official one. So if you find discrepancies, please tell us about it so we can make sure that they both return the same results.